Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. And my name is Sri Khode. I am the VP of Growth and Partnerships here at CAIO Autism Therapy. And my role is really to partner with our payers in different states that we work in and to support our regional directors in each market in all of the great clinical work that we do. So I'm not a clinician myself, but I get the chance to work with really great clinicians across the company. And so we're really excited to talk to you today about incorporating some business concepts into your day-to-day clinical work or into your regions respectively. So our agenda here today is threefold. We are going to talk a little bit about aligning your passions with your organizational needs. We're going to talk a lot about how to identify those passions and how to grow them and foster them to really meet the needs of the organizations that you're working with. We'll talk about empowering business through behavior analysis, bringing our ABA field into the business world and really leveraging some of the concepts there, and then setting broad goals and really implementing them effectively within your organizations. But before we get started with all the content we have planned, we'd love to do a little poll and ask each of you, what brings you here today? What are you hoping to achieve out of this talk? And we have a little Mentimeter that you can, oops, it's the other one.
Sorry about that.
Here are your multiple choice questions and answers. So you're either here to earn CEUs, learn how to integrate behavior science into your business practice, or learn how to become a more effective business leader using behavioral science. Please go to menti.com and use the code 4865-6130 to put in your answers.
We really appreciate honesty, so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for everyone that's adding in some chat responses as well. We're really happy to be here, and some chat responses that we have is learning a little bit more about business leadership as well.
I like the response A, B, and C. We got all three. Awesome. Now we got a question. What is the code for? The code is what you type into menti.com in order to answer the question. Awesome. Okay, I think we're getting a clear winner here, which is learn how to become a more effective business leader using behavior science. That's excellent. That's a large part of our talk today. And we've also got some significant grouping here in earn CEUs, which is great because you will get a CEU for attending. So I'd love to introduce or ask the rest of my panelists here to introduce themselves when we jump into the next slide here. I'd love to pass the ball over to Carrie and talk a little bit about what prompted her to take on more business leadership in her day-to-day work and try to solve some of the challenges we face as business leaders.
Sure. Thanks, Sri. My name is Carrie Hillier, and I am the regional director here in CAIO for the Seattle-Tacoma area. I've been a BCBA for about 8 years, a little over 8 years, and part of the CAIO family for almost 2 years. Earlier in my career as a BCBA, I read the book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, and was very alarmed by some of the data that I was reading. In the book, and if you haven't read it, I strongly encourage it, it's the best. But in the book, it indicates that organizations across the US, healthcare and other, spend billions and billions of dollars on incentive programs and rewards for employees, but don't see any meaningful change in their organizational outcomes or employee productivity. So that's not effective. And as a BCBA, I was floored. We know there needs to be more done and we can make more change. So it was at that time that I really leaned into leadership and realized that I'm highly motivated to grow team members based on personal values and support them in aligning those values with our organizational values and objectives in order to see really meaningful results in both my individual teammates, but also the organization. So Sri, if we could go ahead and jump forward to Grace and introduce her, that would be great.
Yeah, Grace, take it away.
Thank you, Carrie. Love that book plug there. So my name is Grace Gills. I've been in the field of ABA for about 15 years now. I've been a BCBA coming up on 8 years. I am a bit of a nomad, avid traveler. So I've worked in several states. I've even provided ABA across in different countries, across country lines. I'm currently the regional director in the Seattle North area. So I'm Carrie's sister region. But basically, when I started to lean more into leadership, I would travel a lot and I would meet different people, sisters, brothers of someone on the autism spectrum, and they would ask me what I did. I would explain it to them and they would always respond with something like, oh, I really wish we had something like that where we are. And so that really touched me. And, when you think about 70 million something, autism diagnosis worldwide, and 85% of those people being in developing countries, it really tugged at my heartstrings. And when I started to hear this, I thought, what really motivates me and what drives me is impact. How can I be more impactful in the field? And through CAIO's Autism Leadership Academy that I attended when I joined CAIO about 2 years ago, just like Carrie, I saw a direct path through leadership to be more impactful in the field of ABA. So whether that's being more impactful with resources for clinical treatment in new areas, being more impactful with BCBA development or quality services delivered overall, I really, really was driven by the opportunity to become more impactful in the field through leadership. And now I'm going to throw it over to Jagmeet.
Thank you, Grace. I always love to hear these stories because I think that everyone has such an individual path and journey in this field, and it's just so wonderful and always heartwarming to see how everyone got here. Mine also was, over a decade ago and a little unusual. I did not know that this field existed. I have a business background, and I think that that's something that, was that when I was introduced to ABA, working clinically, that was definitely something that I wanted to be in. I also have an educational background, working with children, something that I've done for a long time. But as I grew within the field, as I grew and was given different opportunities, and especially here at CAIO, I'm celebrating my 10-year anniversary later this fall, and have been able to be in different positions where I've had the opportunity, and which I'm very grateful for, is to bring in so many new individuals, introduce them to the field, and help them grow and carve out their own independent pathway for leadership, and continuing that impact and continuing to serve more and more families. And so a lot of what this talk and the way that this presentation was developed was, how do we really combine this? How do we take the behavior science and the science that we know very, very well and being so effective, how do we actually apply that into business? And so really understanding that there is so much from the science that we can actually adopt and really own, and we can create stronger leaders that are really relying on the science to be able to say, how can we be more effective? How can we support one another, and how can we really support the industry? And I think that now is a perfect time than ever before to be talking about the evolution, not only of the science, but the evolution of the industry and where we're headed in the next 5 years, even 3 years, and really being able to use behavior science, bring that to the table. I think it can be really, really be powerful in that way. So what we wanted to begin with here is start with some self-awareness. And I'm actually going to pause because we forgot to do some housekeeping, and I see some chats here. You will get a CEU certification at the end of this talk. We're actually tracking attendance on our end, so you're not going to have any codes, but we will be able to see when you're able to come in and out of this live talk, and you will get the certification. We are also trying to monitor the chat, so if anybody wanted to drop in a hello or introduce themselves, or even just your individual journey, we love to hear those stories. So definitely feel free to drop that in the chat. And if there's any comments, we can share those as well. I meant to do that before I started. So we wanted to begin with self-awareness. And so this is really the foundation. It's really understanding your individual baseline in terms of where you are starting before you head wherever you're going. And so in order to grow, in order to set goals for yourself, you really need to understand where you are, what your strengths are, and very importantly, what your limitations are. Because those limitations are going to allow you to find opportunities and find pathways to further develop yourself. And within that, really being open to feedback. And so, having a mentor that you can really trust, and you can openly take this feedback without any judgment and say, yeah, this is something that someone sees that someone that I trust and value sees that I need to advance myself in. How can I do that? And so being able to use those types of opportunities as learning experiences to further strengthen that. So I'm going to actually pass it back over to Carrie and Grace. They both have some really spectacular stories to share with you all in terms of self-awareness.
Perfect. Thanks, Jagmeet. I'll go ahead and jump in first here and share a little story about how I took constructive feedback to really change the trajectory of my career. This was at my old organization that I worked for many years. And at the time, I had been told I would get highly emotional, very defensive, or shut down really quickly during those really tough conversations or critical and crucial conversations. But I never really accepted the feedback. I didn't really learn from it. I just kind of thought, that's who I am. It is what it is. And it hasn't slowed me down so far. So whatever. And I just kind of kept moving on and going through the motions. Well, fast forward a few years, I was now on the leadership team of this organization. And we were completing an exercise at one of our offsites, and we were going through and identifying what we saw as the strengths of our colleagues and the weaknesses of our colleagues. We were writing them on sticky notes. And every single staff on my team or of that leadership team wrote defensive or emotional, defensive, emotional. And the purpose of the exercise was to promote the conversation around capitalizing on our strengths and really learning what do we need to do to mitigate our weaknesses or mitigate those challenges and support our team. Well, I was floored because my entire leadership team was saying, you're really hard to work with sometimes, because in those tough conversations, you get defensive or shut down, and it makes our job harder. And that kind of crushed me. It hurt my feelings first, but then I realized it's not really just about me. It's about my team and the opportunity for all of us to grow and achieve our organizational and team objectives. So at that time, I really just sat with that information. I reflected on it. I asked for more input and details, examples, and I wanted to think about the implications of the feedback. And I realized at that moment that I was not only halting my own growth, but the growth of my teammates as well. And I really did have to sit with it for a while. So I had to take it and say, do I want to change this behavior? And if so, how? And how would I make it get it done? So at that moment, I took a trusted colleague and said, I need help identifying like precursor behavior, if you will. Cue me in non-verbally during these tough conversations so that I can start to train myself on, okay, what am I feeling right now? What is the context of this scenario? And what is my tap out? How do I get out of this in a safe way or work through it in a safe way? So she would kind of cue me in like, you're starting to say things or you're sitting back. And so she would just kind of wave her hand and then she'd put it on her chin. We had this little cue. And that's how I would know. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm being defensive. So I'd have to cool down, take a break, go get water, whatever it was. And if I hadn't taken that time to really let the feedback sink in, I think my professional growth would have stopped. I would have probably been a really good BCBA just going through, but I wouldn't have taken that next level to become a leader and director of that organization, and thankfully CAIO. So the self-assessment and self-awareness was really critical for identifying self-management techniques for myself to mitigate that defensive and emotional behavior. So even with those challenges, you can create great opportunities outside of them if you sit with it and learn from that feedback.
Carrie, thanks so much for that example. I love it, and I love what you did with it. I know Grace also has a great example to share about how she used self-awareness to really impact her career trajectory. Grace, can you share that with us too?
Yes, yeah, Carrie, I love that story. The humility, it's admirable. I love it. So with me, one of my first huge promotions that I was ever offered was to become a clinical manager. I would basically be overseeing mostly the operations side of the business in a clinic. And this was huge for me. You know, I was a very ambitious baby, BCBA, I call it baby. I was about 2, 3 years in, and I was offered this position. It was a position where I only looked really primarily at the numbers. I crunched them to ensure we were hitting targets and profitable and hitting goals, and gave feedback where needed. It kind of removed me from the clinical side a lot, and removed me from from interacting with people, the people that worked at the company more. And so while monitoring profit and hitting targets and looking at goals are really, really important for a successful business, it wasn't really a position where I was able to mentor and connect with people. And I came to learn throughout my career that one of my greatest strengths was that ability to manage people well. Sometimes without even trying, you know, I would receive feedback from early mentees that I had, or BTs that I'd worked with on a team when I was a senior BT myself. And sometimes, you know, it was just something that came very natural. Sometimes without even trying, people would say, "Oh my gosh, you gave such great feedback. That was super helpful." Or, "I love how you talk to this person," or you deliver this feedback in a way where like, it's good, but sometimes it's like something we need to improve on, but it's really good the way you deliver it. So I came to learn, okay, I'm actually really good at this. I'm great at connecting with people. And so I thought about this role and how it pretty much took away the ability to exercise and improve on a skill that came to me naturally. And I proposed a new role. So as a young, ambitious BCBA, I went to my manager at the time and said, "This is great. This is amazing. I love this opportunity, but I think I would be much better at this." And so I created a role that aligned more with my strengths. And so what the new role was me going around and being basically a clinical manager to start up services in new areas. And I would be mentoring all the new BCBAs in those areas. So it included people management. I knew that I thrived in new situations. I'm a very extroverted person. I'm very social. I knew that I could go and meet the new doctors in a new city, take them out to lunch and do whatever was needed, while I built the business from within, to expand services in areas with less resources. So it directly, you know, I became a mentor for other BCBAs. I helped multiple teams in various locations. And so it directly linked my drive for impact with my strength of people management. And this was really the catalyst for extensive career and personal growth for myself. And so I'm really, really happy I did it. But I think about it in hindsight all the time. And if I just jumped at the opportunity because it was really shiny and gold and sounded really cool, but totally ignored my strengths and things that I really connected with, my values, if I was completely not self-aware at all and paying attention to these things, I would have missed out on this huge opportunity that has led me on a career trajectory that's been really reinforcing and has really nurtured my values.
So as we go through the rest of this presentation, we really encourage all of you to think about your own strengths and limitations because they are so critical. And Grace's story so eloquently demonstrated how you need to be aware of your strengths, what you're good at day to day, and be aware of how those are being showcased in your day-to-day job, as well as thinking about how your limitations may be stopping you from taking that next step. So we really do encourage you to think about those as we talk about organizational needs and how your passions align with organizational needs. We had another survey plan, but we're going to actually skip it for time and go right into some of the content.
And if you like, you can drop it in the chat. What is your career most aligned with? And that way we can hear that out as well.
Awesome. So we do want our individual advancement to tie to business needs. So the goal of your self-assessment of your strengths and weaknesses is to make sure that you're aligning those with whatever the organization needs. So some of the things that we will be talking about in this section is blending business needs with professional development, mentorship structures that assist with discovering the talents, so mentors can play a really key role, and then creating an environment that places value on personal growth. So one of the key concepts I'd love to talk about here is decentralized leadership. This is something we've implemented at CAIO in 2017 to promote growth and regional leadership. So we have what's called a consultant role, and there are 3 consultants assigned to each region to help be part of the leadership team of that region. They are aligned with the areas that we think need the most support: talent, operations, and clinical work. So we have a talent consultant who's focused on mentorship and really making sure the morale of the region is positive and encourages growth and professional development. We have an operational mentor or operational consultant who's really focused on those operational pieces of payer requirements and making sure we are meeting our allocations and billable hours targets. And then we have, lastly, our clinical consultant who is responsible for making sure that we are meeting the clinical goals associated with our treatment plans and that our families are seeing progress on the Vineland. And what this allows and has allowed for the last 5 years is really that additional leadership for BCBAs. It creates local experts around policies and ensures adherence, and it builds regional community. So, for example, the talent consultants for each region can share best practices of how they're boosting morale, or the operations consultants can talk about some of the challenges they're facing in meeting those targets and kind of share best practices. So it's really helped to boost regional community and also cross-regional collaboration. So moving into the next slide, I'd love to invite Carrie to talk a little bit about how we use mentors to identify talent within our region.
All right. I think we can all agree to start off here that finding great talent is very hard, especially if we're outsourcing outside of our organization. So by creating organizational structures that embed trusted mentors or trusted colleagues, we are creating internal talent scouts for ourselves, which is essentially the role of the consultant, or in a benefit of a role of a consultant. These mentors are key in finding top talent within our organization. I'm a BCBA and I'm a mentor to one of the BCBAs in my region. And this particular BCBA shows such passion for clinical excellence, growth, and opportunity. She wants to become a corporate trainer, which is a role that doesn't exist at CAIO for the passion that she holds and the clinical excellence that she holds. But as her mentor, my initial thought isn't, oh, that doesn't exist, so find something else you like. It is amazing. I have a mentee who is very passionate. She strives for clinical excellence and she wants to train people. I can think about something that can exist. I can start to shape her excitement and shape her eagerness to grow by mentoring her, asking more questions, and creating stretch goals for her that align with our organizational objectives and strategic plans. So even if the corporate role doesn't exist today, I can start to embed really fun, meaningful, and tough goals for her to achieve on a clinical level that match our key KPIs or organizational strategic objectives and keep her really motivated. Maybe that role will never exist, but maybe it will, or something else that she's really passionate about will come about soon. But either way, I'm not taking my foot off the gas on achieving our organizational goals, nor am I ignoring my mentee and her passion for growth and opportunity.
Thanks, Carrie. So now that we've kind of discussed how we identify talent, Grace, once we've identified them, how do we grow them into the leaders that we need in our business?
Yes, important question, Sri. So this book here, it's from Katie Anderson. And Katie Anderson is an international best-selling author, and she provided Kaio's Autism Leadership Academy a workshop. So Carrie and I both had training and attended this amazing workshop where she presented this book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. And mostly it focuses on leading with intention. And so as leaders, we should, and kind of how Carrie illustrated in her last story just now, as leaders, we should always be curious and lead with inquiry, right? We know we don't have all the answers. She didn't shut her down immediately and say, no, I know that will never exist. We want to allow space for our mentees to ask those growth-induced questions, right? So create that environment where they're not thinking we have all the answers. An important tool for this that Katie discusses in her book is always asking open-ended questions. So Katie calls it breaking the telling habit, right? So if we always tell our mentees the solution, then they're going to build this behavior of always depending on us, the leader or the mentor, for all the answers, instead of growing their skills, such as the problem-solving skill. So by asking, we are mentoring, right? Instead of just managing them. We want to make sure we always keep it open, have them thinking constantly. So how do we grow them, Sri? We make sure we provide people with systems that are going to enable and promote their success, like Carrie is doing. We're going to give them the structures they need to grow. We're going to always lead with inquiry, intention, and we're going to always stay curious. We're not going to ask questions like, did you call the client in the morning or at night? And they say at night. Or do you think it was a good idea to call the client at that time? They could say yes or no. Instead, we're going to ask, what solutions could we choose to make sure we're calling the parent at the most opportune times? Or what do you think we should work on when we call a parent to make it more effective, right? And leading them to start to think through things and answering those open-ended questions. And then lastly, we should know that we will always, as leaders, we will always be learning and we're always going to be growing.
Thanks, Grace. And Jagmeet, my last question for you is, how do we continue to sustain that growth? So we've identified these leaders, we've trained them, and then how do you kind of keep an environment that continues to grow them over time?
Yeah, and I think that that's a sweet spot, right? Is that it's easy to kind of sometimes create that system and kind of build it out, but how do you sustain? And I think that what we really want to be able to do is take that perspective of how do we have our leaders become more flexible. And we'll talk a lot about how behavior science can support this and the psychological flexibility and being able to adapt to new needs in the moment that they have. But through this kind of lens of like, how are we creating the environment so that way we have discipline and we have consistency in our business? And so, are we setting our goals in a way that everyone has that information in terms of what that goal is? Kind of what Carrie talked about is that this is what we're working towards. Is everyone on the same page of that? And then this continuous idea of revisiting and reflecting, how are we making progress towards that? And I think that, one of the things that probably many businesses had to do or forced to do during COVID is to, reset and just pause and say, okay, well, is this something that's going to be achievable? And if it's not going to be achievable, well, how do we build that momentum for our leaders again, for our business again as well? Is that the goals that we originally had set out to achieve, if that's completely out of hand or something that we're not going to be able to reach, then how do we set different goals and how do we recalibrate in order to be able to pick up that momentum and then build in these systems? And so such as incentives, feedback, recognition, prompting, goal setting, all of those components and successfully achieving that.
Thanks, Jagmeet. I think that's so crucial. And one of the things we here at Kaio take very seriously is sort of resetting goals when we find that the environment has changed. We don't just say, okay, well, do the best you can. We say, okay, let's reset it. Let's be intentional about the new benchmark or milestone we're trying to achieve and achieve it. Okay, so we have another poll for our audience here. What are the components of strong leadership? So just a 1 or 2 word answer would be great. Please go to menti.com and I will just read out the code here in 2 minutes. We got the code is 25632333. The code again is 25632333. Just put in your answers. What are the components of strong leadership? I see some answers here being collaborative, compassion coming in the chat, collaboration, humor, empathy, listening. Open-minded, trust, positive. Okay. Seems like we have a strong word bubble. We're seeing a lot of collaboration, listening, compassion, transparency, patience. Okay. We identified some of these in our own survey here internally and have a few that we can elaborate on. And as you all mentioned, there are very many qualities that define a leader. And so kind of keeping in mind some of these other ones too, as we review these, is crucial. So I think some of the key ones identified really tie into psychological safety. So I'd love to start with that one and talk a little bit about that, because empathy and community and environment, which were all mentioned in our word bubble, kind of tie into psychological safety. And I'd love to ask Carrie to walk us through what this means and how companies can achieve it.
Would love to. This is one of my favorites. Psychological safety. It's one of those buzzwords right now, and I think a lot of us have been hearing it lately, and for good reason. It's incredibly important to create a workplace that is psychologically safe. Psychological safety is the shared belief that the team and environment is a safe place for interpersonal risk-taking. So great leaders have focus on getting to know their employees and create a space that promotes individuality. They create an environment where team members are themselves. They share their personal values, they can be vulnerable, and they can allow their staff to be their genuine selves. These psychologically safe environments allow for trust to develop. And I saw trust on that mentor meter. And I think that's my most important value ever as a leader, is creating trust. And when we have a trusting relationship with our people, we will see results. It's just going to happen. I like to think about trust as competency, consistency, and a clear agenda. And when we have those things, that's where innovation will really happen. We know what we're supposed to do. We consistently get there and we work together. We're predictable and we know what we're doing. So let's hit our goals.
And Carrie, I have a follow-up question. How do you go from the comfort zone to the learning zone?
Man, how do we get there? We got to first set clear goals. We need to know what we're trying to achieve, and everyone needs to know it. We need to hire the right people for the right roles, and we need to just have competent staff. We have the right people in the right positions. And we need to create an environment that accepts failure. You do this by having those trusting relationships with employees, so that if they bomb something or they fall on their face, we're going to help them get back up and try again tomorrow. It's no big deal. We got this together. And when we do all of those things, we're going to move from comfortable and just kind of going through the motions and maybe being productive, but not quite as productive. And we're going to push ourselves past comfort and pursue aggressive growth and hit our objectives.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah.
Jagmeet, I'd love to invite you to talk a little bit about reflection and how reflection can tie into leadership.
Yeah, I would love to talk about this. I think that reflection is something that we as society, as this day and age, I think we just don't practice enough of, is that being able to really bring this practice of reflection, especially into the business and the clinical work that we're doing. It ties back into the self-assessment. Where am I in terms of my baseline? How am I doing in terms of my goals? What are the challenges that I'm facing and how am I responding to those challenges? We had a really fantastic speaker, Dr. John Austin. He came to our leadership team last summer, and he talked a lot about leadership from that behavioral perspective. And one of the key takeaways that we took from that learning was having reflection time, literally adding this into our calendar and forcing this time for us to be able to sit and reflect. And a lot of this reflection and these types of exercises, it again grounds you in a way that you have to be present moment. You have to really understand what are the resources in your environment? How are they working together? Is something not working or fitting? And I think that this purposeful reflection, doing this individually, independently, for your goals, and then also creating this practice within your mentorship or supervision of, let's just pause. We don't need to go down this checklist to answer all of these questions or cover all of these pieces, but how do we just focus or devote time to get creative or be innovative in terms of what the challenges that are. So I would, if there's one takeaway from today, if you guys can add some reflection time, once a week or whatever your time allows. It can be as short as 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or it can be an entire hour that you block off for yourself. But I think as leaders, and all of us are leaders in one capacity or the other, it's really important for us to have that time and to really slow down and understand where we're headed.
Thanks, Jagmeet. And then I'd love to just talk about humility for a few minutes as well, because this is one of my favorites, and it's something that crosses industries. It's not specific to ABA, as none of these leadership qualities really are. They're cross industry, and they really impact leaders across the world. In humility, there was one really interesting example in a book named Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I'm sure many of you may have heard of it or even read it. But there was one specific example about Korean Airlines. Between 1988 and 1998, Korean Airlines had 17 times more crashes than United Airlines. And what they found after several months of digging and identifying root causes was that the co-pilots of these Korean Airlines flights didn't want to speak up when something was going wrong because of the culture that was being established, just deferring to authority, and the pilot was more senior to the co-pilot, and so they just didn't want to speak up and say, hey, I think something's going wrong here. And so really helping to instill more humility within all levels of leadership, creating a more flat organizational structure and saying, hey, even if you're the co-pilot, you have valuable insight. You should be raising your hand to say, hey, something's going wrong, let's course correct, is so important, because once they addressed this, they were able to quickly fix their crash rate and bring it in line with industry averages. And so it was a very fast fix, but it was something that took a little bit of soul searching and really humility to implement within the organization. And it does foster collaboration. It creates spaces to learn and recognize those personal limitations that may be stopping you from taking that next step as a leader. So at this point, Jagmeet, if you wouldn't mind just jumping, yep, there we go. So lastly, there's lots of qualities that make a good leader, as we just talked about, 3 specific examples: psychological safety, reflection, and humility. But like all of you have communicated also, there's others too, collaboration, empathy, and things like that, that really help promote those leadership opportunities. And lastly, what this does is it reduces resistance to business decisions. So when you create that trusting environment, you create an environment where people agree with you. People are okay with the decisions that are being made at that leadership level because they already have the trust, the psychological safety, the humility to say, hey, this is the right decision. I've been brought along this journey that I understand why we're making the decisions we're making. There's already transparency, especially if you think about that decentralized leadership model. There's already that transparency within the leadership structure where they're involved and they have access to resources. And really, they're thinking about how this is ultimately going to improve the lives of the families that we serve, as well as their own lives. So let's talk a little bit about how we can instill the practice of ABA into business. Carrie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Right on. All right. Let's bring behavior analysts to the table. I think as BCBAs or behavior analysts, we're much more properly trained in business management than you might think. We all wear our hearts on our shoulder and we have these clinician brains, but let's take a step back and go kind of to the roots of what we do and then pivot to implementing strategies. We are among the few people that are properly trained because we understand how to utilize emerging technology in relation to human behavior. We know how to set clear expectations for our teams. We write goals every single day. We know how to create SMART goals. We know how to take data on them. We know how to achieve objectives. It's what we do. We use behavior-based instructional designs. We're experts at this. We know we know which methods to use to produce the best results. And we know how to manage contingencies. Again, we do it every single day. We set a clear antecedent, we prompt if we need to, we can tweak things in the moment, and we provide really meaningful consequences to continue to create behavior change. We know what to do in these situations. So by aligning these strategies, it allows us to maximize our business success.
Sri, do you want me to jump right in here?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, everything that Carrie said, I think one important thing and something that I've definitely been learning more and more as a leader is this. It's an important skill to be able to merge the importance of clinical decisions and business decisions. So we know the business decisions are important, but I think as clinicians, a lot of times we try and separate them and we say like, well, that was just made for the business and I'm doing treatment design specifically for the client. So I think we need to really start to hone in more and understand that a leader, leaders have to have all those components of leadership that we discussed previously, but business decisions are needed for both tackling problems as well as taking maximum advantage of opportunities that become available. And that maximum advantage of opportunities are those things that give our clients more consistent hours, more consistency of care, and more high quality treatment. So we know that poor business decisions can lead to high turnover and or business ultimately shutting down. While cost reduction is important, we know that it should always be balanced against the quality of care and levels of services provided. But I think with ensuring that a company is sustainable, part of providing quality treatment is making sure it can be continued as needed, right? So just as behavior analysts plan goals for treatment, it is just as important for the leaders within a business to plan goals for the company and the trajectory of success for the company. Keeping in mind ethics, of course, always, at the heart of business decisions should be the welfare of the client. But also keeping in mind that you could provide the best services clinically, you can be the best clinician in the area, but with poor business decisions, your services will not be sustainable, and so they won't be delivered consistently. So being mindful of your company's business decisions is going to also help guide your company's mission to being successful.
Thank you, Grace. I think both of you put it so well in terms of why it's important for us as BCBAs to really understand where we fit within this puzzle. And sometimes it's really easy to say, well, that's just a business decision. I'm focused in my swim lane here. But these components are important. And I think that over the next couple of years, the industry is seeing a lot of changes. And the more that we are knowledgeable in terms of how we can make these decisions together as a community, I think that that's going to help uplift all of us in our entire field and our industry. So we thought it would be fun to give you a quick OBM lesson in this talk. We thought it was very appropriate. And, you know, one of the main things that I've seen is that when BCBAs, you know, they get certified, you know, they are excited, they get this promotion to BCBA, and then they say, hey, I want to really talk to you. I'm really interested in getting into OBM now. And I think that it's such a misconception to really think that, well, why don't I already, as a BCBA, I already have the tools to be doing OBM in that sense. And so I'm not saying go drop everything and go do some OBM work or whatnot, but you already have the foundation to what organizational behavior management is. Because OBM really is a sub-discipline of ABA, and it's really just taking the same applications and the same principles to improve performance in organizations. And so, yes, you need the right environment and the appropriate supervision and the feedback to really grow your skill set. But as a BCBA, you've really learned those foundational skills and kind of what Carrie went through in terms of we're very well equipped to be at the table doing a lot more OBM than we think. And so performance management, if you've heard of this term, this is a sub-discipline of OBM. And this is a technology applied at the individual level of an organization. So when we're working to improve the individual's performance, we may be doing more of a performance management exercise or feedback in that sense. So in this visual, you can kind of see the breakdown, and I loved how they, put this together. A lot of this is dated back to 1960s, 1970s. And so when we understand OBM from that perspective and how long it's been here and available for us, and how effective it is in the workplace, it's just really important for us as BCBAs to really acknowledge that and be able to own that and be able to utilize that as needed. So really just, an encouragement to really go beyond the ABA toolbox or beyond the current scope of practice and popular practice and continue to be thinking about these principles and generalizing them in different ways. So we can really continue to further the science and further our own development in ABA in that sense.
I always smile with that story, Jagmeet, of people wanting to do OBM. We hear it often, especially with our newly certified staff. I think what's really exciting about utilizing the principles of ABA in the workplace is that we get to show those staff, and all of our staff, you're probably already doing it. You're probably already implementing those procedures. Look at all these structures we've intentionally put into place. We're implementing strategies of OBM by doing this. And by creating those organizational structures that allow leaders to focus on observing patterns, identifying when to intervene or when to create change, and creating the space for their employees to thrive, that's where we get to see the results. At CAIO, we utilize a mid-level individual or a program supervisor or BCBA trainee, I guess, who mentors BTs under the guidance of a BCBA. These trainees are able to practice OBM by being in a really supportive environment that allows them to pinpoint key skills for their BTs or their mentees and work on implementing performance management techniques in a really structured environment. And they're being given really valued and frankly, very hard to come by unrestricted opportunities that are actively supporting our CAIO key objectives and strategies for growth as an organization through a very positive mentorship experience.
So now that we've talked about strategic business planning and how to incorporate principles of ABA into business, I'd love to just take a quick poll, put your answers in the chat if you can. How many of your organizations out there set priorities? I'm getting some thumbs ups and we do's. Perfect. Yep. Great. Awesome. Looks like everyone's doing this consistently. That's good to hear. And then how many of your organizations focus energy and resources towards those priorities? Getting some thumbs ups. Yes, 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 very good. So. Okay, good. That's good. And then how many of your organizations focus on strengthening core operations as it relates to meeting those priorities? Yes. Heck yes. Well, nice. Okay, I like this. Okay, I've got one inconsistent, not enough. Okay, looks like this is maybe a 80% or 75%. All right, let's talk about how many of the organizations ensure that all team members are working towards the same goals. Yes, no, yes. Kind of. Okay, so this is maybe more of like a 60%. Okay, and then let's talk about how many of your organizations establish agreement around intended outcomes. Yes, no. With checklists and audits, great, kind of, middle. Yes, this is more like a 40%. And then lastly, let's talk about how many of them assess and adjust the organization's direction in response to a changing environment. Yes. Okay, this is good. Somewhat. No, no, no. Yes, yes, no. Okay, so we're seeing some inconsistency around the last one. So you're not alone. 90% of organizations fail to implement their strategies successfully. This is an area where the leadership skills that we talked about really come into play, because you need to be able to identify when those goals need to be reassessed and then adjust the organization's direction. And then everything in between is critical towards that as well in terms of achieving the goals that you set out. Just really quickly, I wanted to also mention there are a few other kind of project management techniques and frameworks out there. You may have heard of Six Sigma or instructional design. They all kind of have a similar framework where the critical components are analyzing the problem, identifying and implementing solutions. And then the last piece of it is making sure that you determine whether the changes that you implemented affected performance. And so that feedback loop is very important to any of these management methods and frameworks.
All right, I'm just going to give you guys a quote to sit with here for a minute. When we place behavior science in hands of people at all levels, we can accelerate continuous performance improvement and support agile talent development, more likely to keep up with the rapid pace of change in today's business and work environments, by Carl Binder.
Okay. Lastly, we're going to talk about setting broad goals and how that impacts your organization. So the triple aim of healthcare is expanding access, reducing cost, and improving quality. Not sure if you've heard of this before, but this is a framework that's used across a lot of healthcare, not just ABA. And the goal of it is to achieve these three things. So let's jump to the next slide where we can talk about what they mean a little bit more. So when we say reducing cost, this is really about providing care at an affordable cost for the member, your own organization, and the healthcare system at large. So some of you may have goals around operating margin, and that's really focused on achieving this cost-based goal. When we say improving quality, that really means we want to provide high quality care with measurable results. And the type of metrics that you may see around this would be Net Promoter Score or progress on the Vineland. And then lastly, or any other tool that we may be using to measure clinical quality. And then lastly, when we say access, we're talking about providing care to those who need it at the right time and the right place. So the goals you may see around that are growth in the number of clients or the number of hours, which really means that you're serving more clients who need the service, or you're offering more hours to those that need the service. So how many of you have goals like this within your organization? You can just kind of put it in the chat. Saying yes, yes. Okay, so many of you are familiar. Some of you are not. Okay, so we have goals around all three of these key goal areas. And the main kind of takeaway that I want all of you to think about is, how do you balance these three? Because that is the most difficult decision that you as leaders will have to make, is how do you balance the cost goal with the quality goal and the access goal? And how do you make the trade-offs that are associated? Let's jump to the next slide real quick. Because what often happens is that your goals are in conflict. So for example, if your goal is to improve BT retention, which we know will improve quality because we know that that provides consistency in providers and it provides more hours. But in order to do so, you have to increase the salary of the BTs, or you have to improve cancellation pay, and that is going to increase your cost. What does that mean? What's the third side of the triangle? It's access. So what that means is you may have to compromise on access. So for example, if certain funding sources are not providing a sustainable rate, you have to ask the hard question of, can we keep working with this funding source and still take care of our staff in the way that we need to? Which means that sometimes you may not be able to work with all of the clients that you want to work with because they're not in line with what you consider sustainable for your organization. And so really thinking about how you want to set the goals for your organization by balancing the triple aim is so critical, and it's something we think about every day. All right. Unfortunately, due to time, I think we'll have to skip this one. Unless Carrie and Grace want to do it real fast.
Let's do it really fast.
Yeah, we can do, yeah, let's try it really fast. So the root cause analysis really focuses on treating the problem and not the symptoms of a problem. So Carrie and I are going to illustrate how that happens. And basically the problem that we're trying to solve is one of the monuments, the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. has been deteriorating. So Carrie comes to me as a mentee and I'm the mentor, and I ask, hey, Carrie, how's it going?
Grace, it's not going well. The Washington Monument is deteriorating rapidly. I don't know what to do.
Oh no, why is it deteriorating?
It's deteriorating because of all the harsh chemicals we need to clean it with.
I see. Why are we using harsh chemicals?
Well, we have to use harsh chemicals because there's a lot of bird droppings on it. So we need to clean it off with them.
Oh, I see. And then why are there large numbers of bird droppings on the monument?
Well, because of all the spiders that are on the monument. The spiders are a great food source for the birds, of course.
I see. Yes, that makes sense. Well, where are all these spiders coming from? Why are there large amounts of spiders?
I think the spiders are feeding on all the bugs that go out there at dusk at the monument.
Okay, and where are all these swarms of insects? Why are they all around the monument at dusk?
Well, the swarms of insects are there because of the lights that come on in the evening. Oh, we have to change the way we light the monument to solve the problem.
Perfect, perfect, Carrie. So through this root cause analysis, Carrie was able to reach a solution that's going to be a lot more simple and a lot less costly than a more complicated solution by not continuing to ask why.
Jagmeet, can you kind of wrap up our discussion today with
Yeah,
comments on sustainability?
absolutely. So I know that we're right on time. So I'll make this super quick. I mean, we talk a lot about sustainability and a lot about the importance of creating a business that's steeped in ABA and has a behavioral analysis or behavior science background. So, continue to pinpoint what's important to keep your business running, understand and communicate the why of decision making, and consistently measure progress in terms of examining what's effective. And it is so critical to see that you need to recalibrate your goals as needed. And I think what we want to be able to give you time for, we were hoping that we had some extra time, but just really reflect on what you're walking away with from today. And that would be a great way to kind of begin your reflection practice, is really understand, is there a takeaway from today's presentation that really stuck with you? And if so, what it is, and how do you plan on generalizing and continuing that? So with that, I will say goodbye, and I know we took 1 extra minute of your time here. Just a quick another note, you do not need any code words. We've attracted your attendance, and so we will be sending over the CEU certifications. And thank you all for your amazing comments in the chat box. That always is reinforcing to hear and see. So thank you so much for your feedback here.